All right, so I want to talk to you about another one of the RTS21 architectural digest elements called animation and event management. Now, this is not a pattern to use in code. There is some code element to it, but it has more to do with how you manage the events and animations overall, because we often tie these things in and have to create custom sets of scripts to manage each part of it, because it's not just enough to have a controller that is making something move around. We also have to have something that is triggering the death animation if a unit dies or explodes or something, but we also have to trigger its code state changes to indicate that that is no longer selected or that it is no longer a unit that you can use. So how do you deal with that? You end up writing custom scripts for pretty much every unit in there to help deal with it. Now, a lot of times you can make that generic where you're putting in the animation name, but that is one of the key problems that I find inside of Unity. It's animation structure. Despite the fact there are objects there, the default way of handling this is that you find the text name of it and enter the text name in the inspector. How do you search that? There's no straightforward way to search all of the fields inside of Unity to find out, okay, what's actually using this animation? That's not very easy. So, and also just the fact that when you're triggering stuff, it's not just about animation. Sometimes you're triggering code too. And having to write custom scripts for so many different things can weigh quite heavily on the development and take time to find what they are. So let's take a look at this. Well, first of all, I'll call out what is our solution to this. And that's basically that objects with animations or visual event states will be given a child called events, which has children with event driver objects, which should be appropriately named for the visual state. Now, let's see what that actually means. So when I go into Unity and I select this drone, and inside of here, we see that it's got a child element in here called events. And there's one for onSelect, and there's one for onUnselect, and onDeath, and pack, and unpack. So I can see that it just has these events. These are 5 visual states that this particular object, or this particular unit can go into. There are other ones that have just select and unselect, and other ones that have a little bit more or less. But I picked the drone because it has a lot of options here, and it also has a variety of different types of options. So on select, this one doesn't trigger any animation at all. It triggers and activates a child object, and it also has special cases that trigger whether or not our tech tree logic can work, or other events, other systems that might be paying attention to what we have selected. So let's take a look at this. If I'm playing the code, this is one of the nice features that this has. This event driver system that's in here. If I go into the code, I'll just look at it. It's really light. There is a Unity event called onFired. So what happens when you fire it? And then an actual method in there called fireEvent, which all it does is fire the onFired event. That's it. That is so light. The second thing that it has is that when it's writing the GUI for it, it does puts whatever GUI you have up there for whatever fields might be in there and what stuff's going on. And then after that, it puts in a button called trigger. And all that does is get the event driver, this one up here, and calls the onFired event. It invokes it. That's it. Really lightweight. Now, of course, there's nothing in here about running when the game is running. It can run in the inspector or just when the game is paused or stopped, but it misses out on a lot of things, like your animations aren't going to be triggered, for instance. Okay, so let's go over back into the UI, and we can see over here that we've got this one in here. So the event driver, we've got a couple events in here. We've got onFired, and it is going to find the selected visualization. And you can see when I select this, which actually, let me select the object. That's this object down here. I'm going to move in the game. Okay, so when I select its selected visualization, all it does is it does that. It disables or enables this little circle. Okay, so I'm disabling it just to put it back in the correct state. And then I'm going to go to its event for onSelect. And you can see over here, it takes that visualization item and it just selects it. But it also does another thing. It calls this event gated when player is not human. So event gated, it means that we are not going to execute this particular trigger if the current selected unit is not human. So only the player's units, or it is not player. That might be a better way to describe it. So on this one, if the player is human, or is the key player, the real player, then it'll trigger this particular set of scripts as well, which includes things about its state. So first off, which unit was selected. It has a variable to set that drones are selected right now. And it also has a runtime only. Runtime only. This is int variable add. So we're adding an item. We're basically subtracting the number of units that we have selected. Okay, so anyway, that part, how that works and what that goes to will be in the tech tree, and I'm not going to cover it here. But we can test this. I can click trigger, and we can see that that's selected. I can go over to unselect, and I can hit trigger, and that unselects it. And you can also see the selection of what I can build is going away. There, that's better. So if I go to select my drone, trigger, you can see that this also triggered the buttons that I'm now able to create as a drone. And then I can unselect them, trigger, and that does the same thing. Additionally, we have on death, which I'm going to skip at first, but I'm going to go to unpack. Now, unpack just triggers an animation. It's kind of a cool animation. I'm going to zoom in a little bit to see this. Zoom in closer. There. So the idea is that this packs it up, and I want to test that out. Make sure I have the animation wired up right. Okay, trigger. Okay, great. I picked the right word. If I didn't, I can kind of go back to stuff and just edit this and hit trigger again just to test it out. Something which, if you're writing custom component code to deal with these things, you don't, unless you put the extra work to have buttons in to fire those test states, you're not getting them. Okay, so inside of this, we also have unpack. So I'm going to trigger unpack. There, yay. And now it's there. So we did the unpack animation. Okay, cool. Now I'm going to, so we got these events. Now I'm going to show you death on this one. So death is in here, and we can see that it has two things inside of its event. It is calling something called unit destructor destroy in seconds. So it's saying that this is basically a very simple object that's attached to the root element here, the drone level 1. And it's saying that it's going to destroy it after X amount of time. So in this case, 3 seconds. And then it fires the animation. So the animation is going, and then this is counting the time, and then once 3 seconds is done, it finishes. So if I click this, we can see, the animation, so it fell down, and then poof, it disappears. So all of that stuff is triggered together and tied in place. So let's go to this drone, and let's zoom in here. There. And we can see this one also has the events, so I can tell it to pack up, etc. It's a great way to test the events, just to test visually and start to debug things as you're going. And it should primarily be for visual states. It can trigger code events to happen, but the way that I'm doing that right now is fairly loosely set. So with that one, it is on select, and it is this script right here that is telling it drone is selected. How much further we drive with that, I don't know. That's something, if we start to take it further for how much logic this should control, I don't know. We'll need to discuss it. Okay, so that's it for this one.